Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to a bit of a weird video that is probably pretty surprising to a number of you. Recently on Twitter I reached out to DE Rebecca and asked her if she would let me build her a Yu-Gi-Oh deck revolving around vampires, and because Rebecca loves vampires and she plays vampires in Magic the Gathering and is just really into the super fancy vampire man aesthetic, she was like, of course, yeah, absolutely, as long as I teach her how to play as well, which of course I'm very into. For those that are not aware, I'm pretty into Yu-Gi-Oh! I've gotten kind of like way back into the game, and this is basically the other thing I do besides Warframe at this point. So obviously building a deck for Rebecca was a hell of a lot of fun, and it also got me to explore this archetype, which I don't think is particularly competitive, but it forced me to build a deck that I think is about the best it can be without breaking the bank, which is pretty interesting. Anyway, let's get started with this. I'm also going to go over the main combo in this after I go through all of the cards that are in the deck and kind of why they're in there and what they do. So that'll be at the end as well. It is a 15-card extra deck and a 40-card main deck, so let's just get started. First and foremost is 2 Vampire Starlet Scourge. This is probably the second best vampire at this point, but unfortunately, it's a little bit hard to summon, so I didn't want to play 3 of this card. You can see I have some extras up here in the corner that I'm also going to give to Rebecca just in case she would like to play more of them. But yeah, he can steal opponents' monsters that he kills, and in addition to that, he works as a life point-based monster reborn for any of your vampire monsters that happen to be dead. So if you have, for example, Vampire Red Baron, who's dead in your graveyard, you can spend 1,000 life points, and Scourge can bring this guy back out, which is pretty good value. Vampire Baron, I'm just playing one of. Vampire Baron is like a slightly different version of Scarlet Scourge. His effect is slightly less useful, but I still wanted to retain it just because the utility of it could be useful in some situations, and in addition to that, Red Baron has 200 extra attack, which will probably come up at some point. And then we have the best vampire that is in the game right now, which is Vampire Fraulein. Fraulein is absolutely fantastic. This is just a generally good monster, like not just regarding vampires. I think Fraulein is actually really good just for all zombie decks going forward from this point, simply because whenever anything battles, any battle, opponent attacking you, you attacking your opponent, 2 monsters hitting it up, Vampire Fraulein just shows up, hits the field, boom, for free. That's just what she does. In addition to that, she allows you to spend life points to increase the attack and defense value of your zombie-type monsters, just based on how many life points you spend, up to a maximum of 3,000. This, in combination with one of the other vampire cards, means you can just spend 3,000 life points during every single battle, and like just get a ton of life points on your side back from having really huge vampires that are destroying shit. And you can obviously just put 2 and 2 together and have Vampire Fraulein on the field alongside Scarlet Scourge, and then this is a 5,200 attack monster, basically, that's summoning everything it kills, which is pretty powerful and is kind of the way vampires are intended to win, I think. But yeah, Fraulein gets really good whenever you have a card we're going to go over later on the board. And then one of the last big vampire is Shadow Vampire. So Shadow Vampire is basically a 1-card rank 5 Exceed monster, which is pretty decent, and there is a rank 5 Vampire Exceed monster that is pretty decent in certain situations. I only run the 1 just because it is a bigger monster that is slightly harder to get out. And then I have 2 Vampire Sorcerers. This monster does not have amazing stats, but if this monster is dead and it's in the graveyard, it allows you to banish it from the graveyard to basically not have to tribute to summon one of your larger vampires, so that is pretty useful. And then to go with that, we have 2 Vampire Retainer and 2 Vampire Familiar. These basically do exactly the same thing with like 1 word of difference, in that this one will search monsters and this one will search spell and trap cards that are of the vampire variety. Besides that, the Vampire Familiar can be used for some synchro plays in certain scenarios, and basically these guys will just summon themselves from the graveyard and search cards for you, which is pretty good. Also, just like another extra monster on board, considering all the effects that Retainer has, having 1,200 attacks, not bad. Same can't be said for Vampire Familiar's attack, unfortunately, at only 500. And then we get into some just like generally really good zombie support for the deck. which is Zombie Master. Whenever Zombie Master's effect can go off, it's like a completely for free rank 4 Exceed monster in most cases, and in addition to that, Zombie Master works with both Vampire Retainer and Vampire Familiar, so you can search Vampire cards really, really easily like that without having to banish your Retainer or Familiar afterward, so that's fantastic. The Gozuki-Mezuki combo, with Gozuki being played to get Mezukis in the graveyard. There are a number of ways to get Mezukis in the graveyard. This is kind of one of the few cards in the deck that you just want to leave in your deck and have it be pulled out by other cards. But since Mezuki has 1700 attack, not the end of the world if you just hard draw it. And Gozuki is just useful in general for getting things into the graveyard. This can also send your Retainer or Familiar if you happen to need them in any specific scenario. And then we have the number 1 card that you want to see in your opening hand, which is Shiranui Solitaire. Shiranui Solitaire, this is a 1-card starter to the whole game. You can get an incredibly good starter board that's really annoying for your opponent just by having one of these in your hand, and that's the combo that I'm going to show after we're done talking about all the cards. Unizombie just generally very good, also part of the combo with Shiranui Solitaire. Absolutely fantastic. Also, these are the new ultra rare printing of Unizombie that I pulled from the new set, so that's fantastic. And then 3 non-zombie monsters. These are Effect Veilers. These are Baby's first hand trap. What Effect Veiler basically allows you to do is it's your opponent's turn, it's during their main phase, and they're about to activate a monster effect that you don't like very much. You discard this card from your hand, and then boom, they don't get that monster effect. Super useful, very simple to understand how it works. You can just read the card and know exactly what you're getting. And this is one of like the cheapest, most effective, like kind of, you can just universally splash this into any deck. And it's just good no matter how you slice it. So that's fantastic. And then getting into the spells and traps, 3 Allure of Darkness. This entire deck, besides the Effect Veilers and the Gozuki-Mezukis, is all dark, so you're going to get Allure of Darkness off most of the time. This just allows you to go through your deck and get to what you need. And this is used in like basically every deck that runs mostly dark monsters in the entire game. And then we have Vampire's Domain. So Vampire's Domain, this is the card that you really, really want to see alongside Fraulein. Because when this is alongside Fraulein, it basically just allows you to spend your life points like they're going out of fucking style. Just throw 3,000 life points here, there, to the wind, who cares? Because anytime your vampires do damage to your opponent, you gain that many life points. So if they attack into you with like a 2,000 attack monster, and your monster is like Vampire Retainer, which has 1,200 attack, you spend 3,000 life points from using Frau's effect. Now that Vampire Retainer has 4,200, and you gain whatever you did damage over on your opponent. So that's amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Vampire's Domain also allows you to get an extra normal summon for a vampire monster during your turn, as long as you spend a pittance of life points, just 500. So that's really good. Non-vampire spell cards. We have Foolish Burial, which just is a good way to get any monsters you need to be in the graveyard to the graveyard. Then we have Dragon's Mirror. Dragon's Mirror is a really good card for this deck just because this opens you up to another win condition for the deck, which comes from the extra deck, which we're going to go over last, obviously. And then Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is just a good card in general. Like, there's just, you're allowed to run 1 copy of Monster Reborn, so you'd be kind of a fool not to, I think. That's basically just how it goes with Monster Reborn. That card was banned for a long time for a reason. And then we have 3 Vampire Domination. So Vampire Domination, for those of you that know what the Solemn cards do, this is basically a vampire version of the Solemn cards without a life point cost. The cost of this card is that you just need to have a vampire on the board, and then you can negate whatever the fuck you want. So that's obviously fantastic, and vampires are glad to have a card like this. And then the last 2 cards in the main deck is Vampire Awakening. This allows you to summon any vampire monster from your deck, but it gets destroyed at the end of your turn. Usually this is going to be used to summon Vampire Sorcerer, because then when Vampire Sorcerer dies at the end of the turn after, say, defending you during your opponent's turn, you can banish it from the grave and get a free higher level vampire out onto the board. I think this is like fairly competitive on like a super tight budget for the deck, and it has worked pretty well in testing, actually going a little bit better than I thought it would. But that is, of course, because it is paired with this 15-card extra deck. So we have 2 Dampier Vampire Sheridan, who is the face card for the vampires. This guy's pretty good. The main thing that makes this guy good is if you have a card like Scourge, or it also works with Red Baron, and you steal one of your opponent's cards. This is a level 6 card that's on your side, and this is a level 6, or a rank 6 Exceed monster. So him plus his own effect on one of your opponent's monsters, no matter what level it is, allows you to overlay into a Dampier Vampire Sheridan, and then Sheridan can detach one card to pop any card you want on your opponent's side of the board, or if Sheridan kills a monster and he has a generous 2600 attack, he can detach a card to just summon that immediately to your side of the field, which is also pretty good. So we run 2 of those. 2 Vampire Braum. Braum is okay. It is a enemy deck monster reborn, and what I mean by that is he's a monster reborn, but you're not allowed to summon your monsters. You can summon your opponent's monsters, and I will say that I probably would not run 2 of this if I did not just have the room to do so. 2 might come up, but basically this is a 2500 attack monster that allows you to use your opponent's monsters as ammo, and that's just generally pretty valuable, I think, in terms of Vampire Exceed monsters that are available. And then for the Synchro lineup, I have 1 Dawn Dragster. Yes, this is a race car. Yes, it is in a vampire deck. Sometimes you can just take some zombies and then make a race car out of them. This negates spells and traps. It's very useful. It's just a generic, really good Synchro monster for getting through certain things. Black Rose, much in the same way. Black Rose Dragon. This can blow up the entire board if you need to do that, and it is the same star rating as Dawn Dragster. 1 Ally of Justice Catastor. I imagine this won't come up a whole lot for the deck, but this can kill any monster instantly. That is not a dark type, which, you know, that'll happen. And then we have Bells, the Diabolic Dragon, or of the Diabolic Dragons. This is a win condition for the deck. And coming into these level 8 Synchro monsters, there's actually 1 card that is definitely better than running Shiranui Shogun Saga, and that's Psyframe Lord Omega. Psyframe Lord Omega is a little bit expensive, running at like $10, so I didn't want to grab one for this deck, but Psyframe Lord Omega is absolutely incredible, and if you are looking to buy a card to make this deck better, that would be my absolute first choice, just replacing Shogun Saga. But basically, these 2 are the cards that you're going to have access to from the main combo of the deck, and you just want another target, so Shogun Saga will do. And then rank 4 Exceed monsters. This is just kind of like a small toolbox of solutions to problems. Baguska can stall your opponent. Diamond Direwolf can take care of pretty much any card on the board, and then Castell can pop anything that has protection effects. So Bells of the Diabolic Dragons, this can't be destroyed by anything, but it can be sent back to the deck, and it can be affected by scent effects, and it can be moved to face down, and various things like that. Castell is your way out of similar problems to Bells from your opponent. And then the final vampire monster, which is not actually a part of the main archetype, is Vampire Sucker. So Vampire Sucker does a number of different things. This is a link monster, so its arrows are going to allow you to summon more extra deck monsters. Immediately good. And in addition to that, this allows you to not only draw cards, but also use your opponent's monsters as tribute fodder for your monsters. So basically, you have a Vampire Sucker on the board, and then you summon one of your opponent's monsters to their field as a zombie. That allows you to draw 1 card with its other effect, and then from your hand, you can tribute their monster to summon Scarlet Scourge. So you just get a whole lot of value out of this card. And this is probably the most expensive card in the entirety of the extra deck. And then we have Underclock Taker, which is just a really generic link monster that's just very good. And then finally, we have Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon. This is the reason the Dragon's Mirror is in the main deck. Dragon's Mirror, any 2 zombies, boom, you have Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon. Nether Soul basically makes it so that if this attacks any monster that it can kill, it reduces its attack to 0 instead of killing it, and takes its soul and gives you its soul as a token that has all of the attack of the opponent's monster after reducing the opponent's monster's attack to 0. So from that, this hits a monster, reduces its attack to 0, gives you the token. The token can immediately attack and kill what it came from. So this can just build a huge board out of your opponent's monsters, essentially, and do a hell of a lot of damage. You can also just keep attacking into whatever monster you made 0 attack with Nether Soul and do 3,000 damage to your opponent every turn and get another soul card out of it. So there's a number of different ways this goes really poorly for your opponent, and is just a really good win condition for the deck, I think. But yeah, that is the whole deck. I think Rebecca will have fun with this. I hope Rebecca will have fun with this, because she's into Magic the Gathering, and I'm super into Yu-Gi-Oh! More than Magic the Gathering, although I do play Magic as well. And I think she'll have a good time with it. Anyway, the main combo with the deck is a 1-card combo. This 1-card combo is really impactful, and honestly, against like a really casual player, would probably cause them to quit the game immediately and just tell you that you won. So, right off the bat, that's pretty good. So the one card you want to have in your hand is Shiranui Solitaire. So Shiranui Solitaire, you summon this card from your hand, just a regular normal summon, and then you use its own effect to tribute itself and summon a 0 defense zombie tuner from your deck. So this goes to the graveyard, and then from your deck, you get a Unizombie. Unizombie hits the field, and then Unizombie uses its own effect to target itself and increase its level by 1. So at default, this is a level 3 monster, but it gets 1 more star from using its effect on itself. Its effect on itself also tells you to dump a zombie monster from your deck into the graveyard, which you're going to dump a Mizuki. Mizuki goes to the graveyard, and Mizuki's effect in the graveyard means that it can banish itself to summon another zombie in your graveyard. Shiranui Solitaire is a zombie, so you summon this out. And these are 2 level 4 monsters, and one of them is a tuner. You need tuner monsters in order to summon synchros. So once you've done this combo, in your extra deck, you have access now to Bells, Shiranui Shogun Saga, Boguska, Diamond Direwolf, and Castell, and Vampire Sucker, and Underclock Taker. You have access to all of these cards based on what you need in the current moment, just from playing Shiranui Solitaire. And obviously, there are combo pieces that go with that, but this is the only card that has to be in your hand in order to get this effect. So you can solve problems with Castell, solve problems with Diamond Dire, stall with Boguska, summon Bells if you think that's going to be a good win condition for you, do things with Vampire Sucker to continue your combos. It just goes on, and that's absolutely fantastic. I will say, again, the number one thing that you would really want to do with this combo, though, if you had access to the card, would be to summon Cyframe Lord Omega. And to explain that, Cyframe Lord Omega, once you summon him, during your opponent's turn, you can take the Mizuki that you banished and move it back into your graveyard, which means you can just continue to reuse Mizuki over and over and over again. And that's just absolutely incredible. And along with that, Cyframe Lord Omega recycles himself when he dies. So if your opponent can get rid of it somehow, he just keeps coming back like again and again and again. And it's hugely impactful to the game. Like for example, like if you were using Cyframe Lord Omega, like the reason it's such an upgrade is you could take any of your level 4 monsters, like say Vampire Sorcerer or Zombie Master, any of those. Like you play Zombie Master, then you Mizuki again, get Unizombie out, Unizombie on itself, dump like another card that you need in the graveyard. There you go, Cyframe Lord Omega shows back up. There's just a lot of potential stuff that gets really crazy whenever you have access to that card in particular. Anyway, that is going to do it for this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would honestly like to do more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff in the future because I have a number of other decks that I could talk about at fairly great length. So, yeah. If you guys are into that, let me know in the comments. And I hope Rebecca enjoys this deck. I think she'll have a fun time with it, as long as I choose a deck that is not, like, brutally overpowered to teach this deck to her. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this again, and I will see you tomorrow.